Hello and welcome to the virtual Fairfield Museum. The museum is closed to the public right now, but we're coming to you virtually through programs every week that look at different aspects of the history of the town of Fairfield and hopefully give you a chance to check out some new things and learn a little bit about the town. My name is Walt. My title is the Program and Volunteer Coordinator. That means that I coordinate when we have programs that are running. I coordinate the program with volunteers and docents so that it all comes together to present them. So today I'm here at the intersection of Black Rock Turnpike and Katonah Drive. And the reason that I'm here today is because I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the history of Black Rock Turnpike in particular, including a little bit of a recollection for myself. I grew up not far from here on North Benson Road, so I have a lot of memories, and I'm hoping this will be a chance for those of us who do share many of these memories of this area to possibly connect and talk a little bit about the remembrances that we have of this section of Fairfield. So the history of turnpikes dates back to the late, in particular the late 18th century. The turnpikes were made for, were roads that already existed. I shouldn't say made for. They were roads that often already existed, but in the late 18th century, towns were beginning to realize it was expensive to maintain a lot of these roads. So that what happened was companies were formed or chartered by the state to maintain and take care of and keep these roads up. And part of the way that they were able to make money to do that is they would charge tolls. So they were actually toll roads often. And so you would pay a certain amount over certain distances, and that money was supposed to be used to help maintain and keep up the road so that it was better than many of the other roads. You have to remember most roads in that time period are dirt. Occasionally there are roads that we call corduroy roads, which actually have logs that are put into them or round branches, and so that when people would go over them, they were like corduroy. That was where the term came from. They were very bumpy, but it did prevent them from washing out or having any other problems. So in the late 18th century, about 1797, one of the first turnpikes is the Fairfield and Weston Turnpike, which today would have ended in Easton, but at the time, Weston, when it had broken out of Fairfield in 1787, Weston and Easton actually break out as a single town. And then in 1845, Easton will break out of Weston. And so at that time, it was still all one town. In 1797, it was still Weston. And that actually today is demarked basically by what we refer to as Route 59. So the Easton Turnpike up Sport Hill Road, beginning at North Ave in Bridgeport. Now remember, North Avenue in Bridgeport today was actually sometimes referred to as Truck Highway in the 18th century, and that part of Bridgeport in 1797 is still part of Fairfield. So it's running basically from North Avenue all the way up to about Route 136 in Easton, and that at the time was known as the Branch Turnpike. So it's yet another turnpike that's owned and operated that you could travel on. So in 1806, the road that would have been the old post road, North Avenue in Bridgeport that we were just speaking of, becomes the Connecticut Turnpike. And that is a connecting route between New York and the Housatonic River. It does go farther, but in Fairfield County, that's basically where its ending is at the Housatonic River. In 1812, Black Rock Turnpike, which most of the road had already existed in some way, shape, or form. We know that in 1777, when British forces are marching up to Danbury, they actually march along a portion of what is today Black Rock Turnpike. So it certainly the roads existed, but the actual company begins to take it over and take care of it. Now, you may have begun to realize that these routes, so today 59, which is the traditional Stratfield and Weston Turnpike, Black Rock Turnpike, Route 58, were basically north-south turnpikes. And in particular, the reason for these turnpikes had a lot to do with the spreading out of the early communities of Fairfield County. Fairfield, Stratford, Norwalk, these towns had all started near the coast, and because there was water access, and that was the primary mode of transportation. So towns that were fortunate enough in history to have rivers near them could travel north and south to other towns, communities where farming and other things are going on, and be able to get those goods and bring them south. The most famous of all of these is probably the Hudson River. Here in Connecticut, we have the Connecticut River, where they could travel up these rivers. And so where those rivers didn't exist, turnpikes get built, or these roads that connect, in our case, in Fairfield here, areas of Reading, and then eventually up to Danbury, New Milford, to the coast, to the harbors. In the case of Black Rock Turnpike, it's going to go all the way to the Black Rock harbor, which once again, until 1870, is actually part of Fairfield. So goods could be carried from northern areas, brought down to the harbor. In other areas, the way they get around doing turnpikes, once again, if you had enough water, is that often what you would do is you would have canals. This is also that era from the early 19th century through the mid-19th century of canal building. Probably once again the most famous being the Erie Canal in New York State, which is going to help connect the western lands with the Hudson River. And then of course the Hudson River is large enough that ships can sail up and down it and bring goods to New York City, and is part of the reason for the growth of New York City. We have a few canals here in Connecticut. The Farmington Canal, which is made in 1828, goes from New Haven to Farmington, Connecticut, and eventually will go farther. But the idea is to use water to transport. But there's also another mode of transportation coming along at this same window, and that is something called the railroads. So the first steam locomotives begin running in the 1830s on the Baltimore, Ohio, the Camden and Amboy, some of these other, some early, very, very early railroads. Some of them had horse-drawn railroad cars before that. But many of them are moving to steam in the mid 1800s, and so those railroads are starting to move more and more things. In 1836, the Hartford and New Haven begins construction. So once again, following that north-south corridor, excuse me, that's going to get started. The same year, the Housatonic Railway Company is chartered. Now, it's actually going to run a rail from New Milford all the way to Bridgeport. Now, Bridgeport, by that time, is already a town. It's actually, by 1836, it's actually become a city. So it is a growing city, and it has its own harbor. So the Housatonic Railroad is being built to basically now be that transportation service to the harbor. In this case, Bridgeport Harbor. By 1839, that is the first section of that is completed from New Milford to Bridgeport. Once again, it too also will later go farther north. The other thing that's coming into play here is that in 1849, the New York-New Haven Railroad begins running regular service. So that's running on an east-west corridor, and today that's basically Metro North that it is running that same route. So the railroad is really kind of taking over all this transportation, whether it be goods or people, Railroads are becoming much more reliable and much more serviceable. And so the Turnpike system sort of begins to close down. Some of them as late as the 1880s are still collecting tolls, but most of them by the end of the 19th century are now free of charge to people to be able to travel on them. So today, as I said, we're on Black Rock Turnpike, and part of the reason I sort of chose this spot is because the building that's behind me here, so I'm gonna go off to this side, maybe I should go off to this side, right? Oh, there we go. Is when I was a young man, was the site of Myro's farm stand. So the area of Black Rock Turnpike, where my grandparents or even my aunts and uncles, my dad, would talk about this area being farm. When you went shopping, you would go to the Post Road. The Post Road area was where you would shop. But I remember shopping here on Black Rock Turnpike, and part of that has to do with the changes that are going to occur. So when my aunts and uncles, my grandparents are younger, this is all farmland, basically in the whole direction, north-south, almost all of it's farmland or residential area, but there's very few businesses. So that's going to start to change in the 1920s, 30s. We start to have a few gas stations set up. There's one, in fact, up the road here at what we today call Coons Corner. It's not Coons Corner in the 1920s when that gas station opened, but it's the area where Black Rock Turnpike and Tunxus Hill Cutoff and Tunxus Road sort of form a little triangle. There's an island there where today Chips and Olay Soccer and places like that are. But it would become eventually Coons Corner. And then the real changes we start to see in about 1939. Now, part of that has to do with that's the year that the Merritt Parkway gets opened. And so people who want to go on a country drive out of New York can come to follow the Merritt Parkway. One of the places they can stop and get off is here on Black Rock Turnpike. So we start to see that growth, but the real growth happens in the 1950s, and starts in particular with a gentleman by the name of Joseph Cozy, was a nickname that he had, Dolan, who will open basically the corner where the Angus Steakhouse is. Today it's a little pub, but it was the Angus Steakhouse for the longest time, about 70 years. And that opens in 1950 and sort of becomes the anchor for basically the area between Sant Mortar Drive and Tunxus Hill, Coons Corner, what will become Coons Corner. And that Coons opens their hot dog stand in the 1940s. They have a little shop. Later, they'll actually open a full restaurant in that little triangle. So basically, that area between Sant Mortar, Black Rock Turnpike, all the way to Tunxus Hill will basically grow and develop in the next 10 to 15, 20 years rapidly. There's a lot of businesses. And so I am just going to go through some of the ones that I remember. At one point, I was actually trying to calculate when did these businesses open and close and move and whatever. That became a lot. So I just decided, for me right now, it's going to be a little trip down memory lane. So I have been told that there was a bowling lanes, Zost bowling lanes. I do not remember that. My understanding is the structure burned down. That, I understand, was actually farther down, closer to where today Lilac House and some of those restaurants, some of those businesses are. It was at that end. There was Grand Union at one point. Fairway Beef, which for those of us of a certain generation was one of those places that you went grocery shopping. It had a big cutout. It had a tall front and a big cutout of a cow. It had a cow-shaped window, like the cow's head. That would actually burn down in 1989. I actually remember the night of the Fairway Beef fire. And that is where today CVS is located. You can sort of see from where I am where the Dunkin' Donuts and Kids Cleaners, AFC, Urgent Care That was Leopold's, which was a meat butcher shop. Can you remember going there? Fairmart, which was over by where Trader Joe's is today. Howland's, which was located at the same site as Old Navy. There was Jimmy's, which later becomes Arthur Treacher's. There may have been another restaurant there for some time. And today is Dutch's, the Pike Diner, which today is Penny's Diner. Ponderosa, which I'm trying to remember, it became another steak place. Ponderosa was like a steak place. You could go and get, you would order your steak and then you'd go down and get it at the end. Today it's where Panera Bread is. Loopy's, which was actually across the street when I was a kid from Coombs Corner. Then behind me, part of the reason that I mentioned this is the Myro's Farm Stand, which was here about 1965. And that was here. There was Lee's News Stop was located here. There was a pizza place or a deli at also. There was Big Buy, Finest, which was today where ShopRite is, would become Edwards at some point. But once again, just there are a lot of these businesses have come and gone, some still here. Certainly Black Rock Turnpike has gone through changes, as many parts of Fairfield have. But like I said, it's just, an amazing thing to witness and see. And if you're out, as the weather's starting to get nicer, and out and about, driving around or taking longer bike rides, or even longer walks for that matter, as you're out, remember when you're walking down these roads and streets that they all have their histories, places and businesses that have been there at different times. So I hope you've enjoyed my little trip there. Like it's a little reminiscing from me there. Hoping to hear from others who remember the Black Rock Turnpike area and share some stories. So once again, like I said, really do hope you've enjoyed, and I've enjoyed sharing this with you. So remember, if you do enjoy, you can help us by supporting us by becoming a member or making a donation. If you're interested, please check out our website at fairfieldhistory.org, and there's information there. There's also information there about many of the other programs that we're offering virtually for people to see. So my last thank you so very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the History Trail. Goodbye.